Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com.
Welcome to the third edition of the Double A Team. I'm Ken Fang. Our co-host is Stephen Negishi. And tonight we have in another action-packed show. We don't have quite as many guests as we did in the second show when we had three guests. We have Jeff Pearlman, spectacular writer. He's done a lot of stuff, and we'll have him talking to us about a myriad of subjects. Stephen, glad to see you again, and hope everything is okay with you.
Thank you, Ken. It's great to be with you again. And, we definitely have a lot of things to talk about in our opening monologue, obviously pertaining to, our Asian American Pacific Islander community.
We certainly do. And let's get right to it. Let's not delay. And we start off with Houston, Texas owner Cal McNair, who has made reference to the Asian virus is something that Stephen and I are very sensitive to. We've heard this comments about the China flu, the China virus since 2020 when former President Donald Trump started it, and then Cal McNair apparently took off with it. It's really silly about seeing things like this being made, comments like this. There are a lot of ignorance. As someone whose background is Taiwanese and also have Chinese blood in me as well, I'm tired of hearing about this. Let's go a little bit into it, Stephen. Your reaction as well.
Okay, so for those of who's not familiar with the Cal McNair story, Michael Silver, a longtime well-respected writer with the NFL Network, apparently he left NFL Network to join Bally Sports. And this was actually somewhat of a scoop by him. Apparently, McNair made a statement 5 months ago or so at a golf outing when he made that statement. And apparently, one attendee in the article was gasping and was shocked, while his wife was also laughing or smirking, whatever you want to call it, when her husband made that comment. So, I am a proud Japanese American myself. And one of the reasons why I started the show with the help of Aldo, along with Ken as my co-host, was because, we needed to have a better representation. And I still believe in that. And this is one of the reasons why we started our show, in order to combat racism towards our community. And there is no question that Cal McNair's comments are just unacceptable. And considering the history of Houston Texans in recent years, that's another black eye to that moribund franchise right now that has been decimated by bad trades of DeAndre Hopkins, by then head coach Bill O'Brien, Deshaun Watson's sexual allegations that has not been resolved at all, and now this. At some point, the NFL has to really step up, and this is and unfortunately NFL has not released any statement there was no comment according to the NFL spokesman Brian McCarthy. And the other thing that I also wanted to point out, this was actually something that we brought up on our very first show, was a real nothing. There was nothing from people like Pablo Torre as well as Mina Kimes, who ironically is on ESPN's NFL Live on a daily basis. And I don't recall neither one of them speaking up. And when we had Mikey Chan, who covers the Fighting Irish on the USA Network, USA Today Network, I should say, that was something that Mikey also brought up, that people like Mina Kimes haven't been very, very vocal about the AAPI racism. And unfortunately, this is another a disappointment in my eyes.
And we see some of the reaction also on Twitter. People saying, well, what's the bad thing about this? It's not really racist. And Stephen, I know you actually got some reaction when you tweeted this out, in your reaction as well. Some of the really the ugliness and the hatred and the xenophobic reaction that you've received is some of the stuff that you got as well on Twitter.
Right. So this was something that Andrew Brandt was tweeting out about, bemoaning the lack of action by the NFL regards to the Washington football team email. And I tweeted out that, I'm disappointed that Cal McNair's racist comments have not garnered any single attention, which Andrew Brandt was kind enough to retweet it. And this is the comments that I received from, the trolls, or, whatever you want to call them, wanted to attack me for my, Asian American background. And it kind of is an indication that what Ken, myself, and our community has to deal with, unfortunately. And these are the types of people that that we have to face on a regular basis. And unfortunately, it's a daily occurrence all across the country.
Yeah, and it's just something that, again, we're seeing all over the place. We're seeing it in media. We saw it from the leader of our country last year, and we continue to see it. So it's sickening to me, and I'm tired of it, and I know you're tired of it, Stephen, as well. I'm just hoping the NFL will do some type of discipline, but as we have seen, the NFL is quite critical. They'll go after John Gruden for racist comments that he made several years ago in private emails that he made to the Washington football team. Yet something like this, silence by the NFL, and also, as you mentioned, silence from ESPN, which is, of course, in bed with the NFL. So I don't think, even if Mina Kimes wanted to say something, I think that she would probably be hear directly from her bosses because of ESPN's relationship with the NFL. I've seen it before with ESPN, especially when they tried to run the concussion documentary that they had with PBS so many years ago, and of course now this. So I'm not surprised not to hear from prominent Asian journalists like Pablo Torres and Mina Kimes. I'm surprised. I think maybe they've been handcuffed. I would like to hear them say something privately, or maybe if we have a chance to get Mina on the show. I'm not sure we're going to be able to, because of ESPN's public relations department is very, very tough, and kind of similar to the Soviet Union back in the 1970s. But and I say that kind of facetiously, but maybe not kidding, maybe not. But it's kind of interesting that we have to put up with this. And again, the NFL being hypocritical about what it will punish and what will not punish.
Absolutely, Ken. The fact that they haven't done anything, or they try to obviously silence about the Washington football team email, despite overwhelming evidence, which led to the dismissal or hasty resignation of John Gruden. And obviously they're trying to sweep it under the rug just by, just putting it all on John, Gruden himself and nothing more. And it is absolutely shameful. And if they can't police themselves and they can't, take action against the Washington football team, email fiasco, I don't expect them to do anything about us, because this is something that we've also touched on our second show. There's a lack of a representation in the NFL and football in particular, because of the masculinity and the machoism that the violence that the NFL and college football to a certain degree has long been known for. And us Asian Americans, we don't have a lot of players historically at all in neither sports, and even in the front office for that matter. So that's the attitude that unfortunately perhaps exists or long been permeated within the ownership, the front office management, and also the media. That narrative that you and I have to long deal with for foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. And it's something that I hate to think that we're going to keep discussing because of the polarized political situation that we're in. But I have a feeling this is not the first time nor the last time we'll have to address this issue, Stephen. So
absolutely.
Let's go on to our next topic. It is what Asian mixed martial arts fighter Kai Wu has had to put up recently. Stephen, why don't you go ahead and talk about that as well?
Okay, so I believe he was at the restaurant that he was working in, and we have actually received a permission to roll the clip from him about the stuff that he heard while dealing with some customer over an order. So if you can roll the clip, producer Joe, we'll let the whole video speak for itself.
Right now. I don't understand. I don't understand what you want. Yeah, I told you what I want, and then you say you don't know what I want?
You don't have sushi, I think. I'm not selling sushi here. I don't have sushi.
I don't know. And I understand that one.
I'm here. I don't have sushi.
But what?
So sorry, you're not selling sushi.
But that's bullshit, number one. And number two, you can't keep saying that. So let's get something American straight. You don't.
Hey, excuse me.
We're gonna.
Don't be. I heard what you said. You said he can't speak English.
No, it's not the issue.
You said he doesn't speak English. I heard that. And then you also said sell sushi. They don't sell sushi here. I'm explaining. They do. I've been eating here for like 5 years. They don't sell sushi here.
Yeah, no, I have, and they do.
Just don't be racist too, though. At the same time.
No, because here's the thing. Don't tell me something we don't have when they do.
What did you like? Did you buy something?
I don't want an argument, but it works both ways. It works both ways. Like you want to say one way, it's gonna work.
What's the other way? What's the other way?
Then the other way is we get served. And we have a happy ending.
We can't serve you what you want, but we don't have.
They don't sell sushi.
Hey, you know what? That's
There
not what
used
I
to be
was
a
told.
sushi bar down there. It's closed now.
Not what I was
So
told.
hot
Who told you that? Just check on your phone. They don't have sushi here. And then if the man's talking to you, he has his mask
That
on.
is
You can't
exactly what
understand
it
him.
says
Don't tell
on the
him
app,
that he's Asian, and
actually.
then you can't understand what he's saying because he doesn't speak English. He speaks perfect English. I speak them just fine. If there's an issue, it's
I would strongly disagree that you speak perfect English, and I would strongly disagree that you have sushi.
That's
and I would
fine if
strongly
you don't think I can speak
disagree
English.
with what's
Step
on the
outside
menu.
though.
I
Everyone's enjoying
strongly
their food.
disagree.
Step outside and we can talk.
As you can see, that Kai Wu was trying to very much diffuse that situation and tried to do it respectfully. However, this customer just continued just to insist that the restaurant serves sushi. You also may have heard some language. We apologize for that language. Nothing much we could do about that, but I'm glad we ran it raw to hear what some people have to deal with. And Stephen, as you mentioned, we hope to have Kai on a future show to talk about that situation. But as you can see, he was trying to deal with the customer respectfully, tried to diffuse the situation, was trying to be very respectful, but yet the customer was still insistent and also was being quite disrespectful.
Yeah. I don't know if the customer who was blurred on the left side of the video you saw was either drunk or high. I can't tell, but he was repeating the same thing over and over again about having a sushi. For those of you who couldn't hear or have a hearing problem, and the restaurant worker on the right side was trying to explain to him that they don't serve sushi. And then before things kind of got out of control, Kai Wu, the professional MMA fighter, stepped in. He was in the middle of that video, trying to calm down, or I should say calmly try to diffuse the situation. Now, considering that he is a legitimate, MMA fighter, not to the, like a UFC main card level type fighter by any chance yet. And if things really, really got out of control, he could have really kicked that guy's ass. And believe me, if I had half of his fighting skills, I probably would have whooped his ass too, considering how demeaning and degrading he was in that situation.
Yeah, and as we saw, Kai was trying to do the best he could. He actually haven't stepped outside. He's a better man than me. I probably would have tried
Absolutely,
to.
yeah.
He definitely he could have easily, probably, I wouldn't say probably. Well, he could have easily taken the man out, but he just chose not to, and he just, as we saw in the video, was very respectful. Was just saying, "Hey, look, there's no reason for you to use that language. There's no reason for you to be disrespectful for this gentleman and this restaurant who don't serve sushi. So please step outside." Obviously, this person wasn't having it, but Kai was very respectful, and kudos to him. As you mentioned, Stephen, but definitely a better man than both of us. We probably might have gone a little bit.
Absolutely.
But
sorry, absolutely.
As someone in customer service and works in the retail industry, there's so many things that we've seen unruly customers that you just have to, unfortunately, have a stiff upper lip and do the best you can in that situation. We have our guest coming up. His name is Jeff Pearlman, writer extraordinaire. We'll be coming up with him after this short break.
The past year has seen a 1,900% rise in anti-Asian hate crime in New York City alone, with 2,800 incidents reported across 47 states and Washington, D.C. This is a national crisis, and we need your help to call it out. Call it a crime. Call it what it is: racism. Let's stand up together against hate. Learn more at stopaapihate.org.
We're back with the AA team, Ken Fang, along with Stephen Negishi. And we used in the second segment, we as always a guest. Last week was last time was 3 guests. Today we just have 1. And he's a fantastic writer. He's done work for Yahoo. He's done work for all types of websites. He continues to do work. He has his own, place on Substack. We bring in Jeff Pearlman. Jeff, great to see you. And he's a man of figs, as you see on his label. Jeff, great for you to join us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's very rare that people bring up Yahoo, which means either was that on my Wikipedia page? I don't even know where you pulled that up from. Where'd you get that one from?
Jeff, I followed you for a very long time on Twitter.
That was like a week and a half of my life in like 2010. Very impressive. Very impressive.
And let's not forget, Ken is the associate editor of Awful Announcing, which obviously covers all things sports media. So you are definitely, a part of the media, as people would like to say.
Yep.
Jeff,
thank you so much for coming. Sorry, Ken. I just wanted to kind of give you a background. You were on the Barroom Network back in January, if you remember. Bare Our Souls, I believe the show's name. Founder and producer Aldo Gandia and his co-host Dan Aguirre actually recording the show on this very same night. You were on the show, very same show, back in January. Do you remember that show?
I can lie to you. Do you want me to lie to you?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say it was the greatest show experience of my life. And I would actually say, I'm going to be honest with you. I have 3 kids. I would say the birth of my son was the best moment of my life. The birth of my daughter, also the best moment of my life, until last January, when that show changed my life forever.
It was actually January of this year.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Yes.
I'll I'll make sure Dan and Aldo will see this episode. But you were on that show to talk about. I think Dan was quite interested in talking about one of your bestseller, Sweetness, which obviously talks about Walter Payton and Dan being a huge Bears fan, and obviously this network based out of Chicago. You remember that conversation?
I actually do. I'm being sincere because I remember it because I don't you don't get asked that often about books you wrote. You tend to like talk about their most recent book. So that was a refreshing dip back into a book I wrote about probably 8 years ago now. So that was good, or 9 years ago. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And also, you also wrote about something that you have been tweeting about over the last couple of years, was your work on the USFL book and on the work about Donald Trump. And I was always fascinated because somehow you'd always bring about some of the things that he managed to do and let's put it bluntly, in ruining the league, which had a very good niche in the spring, and then tried to bring about a competition with the NFL in hopes of trying to merge with the NFL. And of course, Jeff, I thought that some of that work was just absolutely fantastic, and some of the brilliance that you brought in, especially with his rivalry with the Tampa Bay owner. I'm drawing a name. Yes, absolutely. So it's just absolutely the Bassett, absolutely. So some of the stuff that you were, some of the really fantastic work and some of the research that you made.
Thanks. I as you know, I'm a huge Donald Trump fan. I think the guy's great. I hope he becomes. He needs to be dictator of this country. He needs to take over this country. We need to change the name of this country to Trumpicott. No, the thing that was crazy about that book is I was reporting it while Trump was running, and yep. I mean, I was like, it was driving me mad because I kept saying to people, like, this is the same crap. Like, this is the same crap. Everything he's talking about now, he did then. And the example I always used is he kept saying, there was this period he's running and he's like, Mexico is going to build a wall or we're going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. And I kept saying, like, it was at that point when I was researching, he signed Doug Flutie out of Boston College, a Heisman Trophy winner. And he literally wrote a letter to the owner of the president of the USFL and the commissioner of the USFL and the owners of the different teams, saying, I'm doing you a favor by bringing Doug Flutie here, and I expect all of you to pay for it. And that was 30 years earlier. And I kept saying to people, it's this, Doug Flutie is the wall. Like, Doug Flutie is actually the wall just 30 years earlier. And people thought I was kidding. And I guess it was kind of funny, but I was actually being serious. Like, all the same lines, all the different things, the bullying, the lying, the deceit, throwing people under the bus for his own personal gain. It was also recognizable. And I had people say to me after the election, why didn't you talk about this? And I was like, I did talk about it. Nobody listened to me. Jesus Christ, man. How much more could I talk about this thing? But nobody, I'm just a sports writer, you don't have that big of a platform.
What's interesting too, is that just recently, I think there was an event in Georgia, and of course, Trump is trying to push Herschel Walker as a Senate candidate. But it's interesting is that Doug Flutie was also a host there as well. And people said, Doug Flutie, but then you have to think back to that connection back to when he was in the New Jersey Generals. So it all flies in one place, Jeff.
It was really depressing to me, and I still don't get it totally. Like, you're Doug Flutie, you're Herschel Walker. This guy ruined your league. Like, there's no ambiguity about that. He ruined your league and did it gratuitously, just out of his own, greed. And I just, at the end of the day, I just think far too many athletes are a lot of them, it comes down to what did this guy do for me? And I'm sure Doug Flutie and Herschel Walker both think, well, he paid me well and blah, blah, blah. And the plane flew and I got to play football and blah, blah, blah. And that's enough. And the unwillingness to look around. I mean, this is one thing about athletes has always driven me crazy, and certainly not all, but there's a certain sheltered nature to it all. And you become trained, you know, if you're a baseball player, as an example, the best thing you can do as a baseball player is focus on you. Take your BP, take extra cuts beneath the stadium, make sure your glove is ready, make sure you're conditioned, your stretch, well, it's all very personal. And that doesn't really apply to the world when you're out there and you need to look out for others and the betterment of others. And I think far too many athletes are so focused on how is this going to affect me? And if you're Doug Flutie and you're Herschel Walker and you're in a top income tax bracket, maybe you're thinking, this is great. This guy wants fewer taxes and he paid me well, but it's ridiculous.
Absolutely. It's so true. And the book of Bucks about the USFL, you know, that if you have Football for a Buck, if you haven't had a chance to read this, it's absolutely fantastic work. And Jeff, how many years did you go and research this until it came out?
That was a quick book. So basically, I've been dying to write a USFL book for years. Actually, it had nothing to do with Trump running for president. That was his timing. And I could not get a book deal. And I pitched to a publishing company, Houghton Mifflin. I said, what if I write a Brett Favre biography? Will you pay me for that and pay me a little less to do a USFL book? And they said, yes, but you have to do the Favre book. So I did the Favre book. I actually loved the experience. And then the money I got for the USFL book was so crappy. Usually I take 2.5 years to write a book. That I basically had a year. The thing is, I was so giddy writing it and so happy researching it. USFL was my favorite league as a kid. So it was basically like diving back into your childhood. So for me, it was like, really? I mean, the first thing I did is I went on eBay and I ordered all the old USFL media guys. And then the second thing I did is I went through them and tried to find every single person I could. And it was just a joy for me. The Trump stuff was almost the damper on it. Like everything else, if I were in my office right now, you'd see a huge USFL photo behind me. I freaking love the USFL.
Yeah, and what's funny is that sometimes I look at the old YouTube videos. ABC, Al Michaels was doing the halftime, and Keith Jackson was doing the play-by-play, and
Jim Lampley.
Yes, absolutely. And ESPN had in its infancy was airing games as well because they didn't have any summer programming. So it was just fantastic to watch, and it was. They found a niche. They absolutely had a niche in spring football. They had very good ratings, and unfortunately, I love that still of Al Michaels there in the studio. So
very impressive effects on this podcast. Nice.
I absolutely love this, and just the fact that and they were playing in NFL stadiums as well, playing in Soldier Field at Boston University. They play at Nickerson Field, which unfortunately is now a soccer stadium, and actually not, but. Really fun place, and I know Stephen and I had discussed earlier that we were not discussing the USFL bowl, but it's just a fun thing to talk about.
I mean, there are a lot of things you have to think about, or I always think about with the USFL. Like a lot of what you see in the NFL now is because of the USFL, or at least the USFL did first. And first of all, they really were the first league to give African American quarterbacks a shot. At the time, the NFL was all about like the guys you see now. To me, the guy who's the quintessential USFL quarterback who never would have gotten an NFL shot is Kyler Murray. Like Kyler Murray back then, all these NFL teams would have been like, number one, we're not going to have a black guy playing quarterback. Number two, his size, he's going to have to play defensive back. And you look at the USFL, and they had tons of African-American quarterbacks. They were like, if you can play, you can play, and we're just going to do it. And then you look at the wide-open offenses now. I mean, that's all from the USFL. The run and shoot offense with the Houston Gamblers, the 5 wide receiver sets, the quick drops, the slants, the Houston Gamblers with Jim Kelly, rollout quarterbacks. It's no longer, guys back then, the norm was Terry Bradshaw, Dan Fouts, Ken Anderson, Ken O'Brien, those types of quarterbacks drop back and throw. And meanwhile, the USFL was doing all these rollouts and just really funky stuff with offenses. And the 2-point conversions start in the USFL. The coach's challenge start in the USFL. It still pains me pains might be too strong of a word, but it bothers me that the USFL numbers don't count at all when it comes to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I look at a guy like Sam Mills, who hasn't gotten in, he was the best player in the USFL for 3 years. You know, like that could matter a little. Even Herschel Walker, who Lord knows I can't stand. Herschel Walker is a dominant force in the USFL and a really important figure. And you can at least make the argument that he belongs. Same with Flutie. I mean, you can make the argument. It is called the Pro Football Hall of Fame, not the NFL Hall of Fame. Right. And it always infuriates me that those leagues mean absolutely. Now, I'm not saying you balance USFL numbers equally with NFL numbers, but I think they should play a factor. And they don't even. You got 4 USFL players in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's not even mentioned on their plaques. Like you go in and you look at Steve Young's plaque, it says he played for the Buccaneers and the 49ers. It doesn't even mention the Express. Like it just never happened. And that infuriates me.
Absolutely. And there was a classic game I think he and Jim Kelly played. They were throwing touchdown after touchdown. And I think it was on ESPN, if I remember right. It was in primetime game, and they just went back and forth. And really, if that was on NFL Films, that will be played on NFL Network ad nauseum, because that was an absolutely fantastic game to watch. It was just so fun because there were so many touchdowns being scored, and they were just throwing the ball. They were just throwing bombs left and right.
Oh yeah. Also, not for nothing. Wait, who is that picture we're staring at right there? Who is that? You guys just decide to put an old guy on the screen just for one time.
I don't know who that was, to be honest with you.
I don't know.
That's actually my uncle. That's my Uncle Rex. Yeah. No, the other thing was just not like the uniforms were dope. Like the Oklahoma Outlaws, the Arizona Wranglers turned Outlaws. The colors were flashy and like daring, and the names were cool. Like I just remember being a kid. I remember like the reason that the thing that fell in love that did it for me with the USFL early on was I grew up in this tiny town in Mahopac, New York. My parents would not let me subscribe to Sports Illustrated because it was too expensive. So I'd walk to the library and read SI. And I remember opening they would encase it in plastic, the week's new issue. Yep. There was Herschel Walker on the cover. And you open it up and it had a spread for the first USFL season, like a preview, and it had all those helmets, and they were like floating in space. And the helmets were just, and the cover was Herschel Walker, who was like a king in a brand new Generals jersey, and it said "Hitting Pay Dirt," and it was just magic. You know, things are. If it came along now, sitting here at almost 50, I'm probably too cynical and too old and whatever. Wouldn't have the same. But through my 12-year-old eyes, it was I still have a 12-year-old's view of the USFL, and even looking at these clips, I can tell you who's running. I can tell you what team he's playing against. I can tell you what's happening. I mean, it's just I love that stuff. There he goes against the Philadelphia Stars. Actually, they were the Baltimore Stars that year. It's not even the Philadelphia Stars. Yeah,
that's
awesome.
Right. That's absolutely right. And of course, I'll never forget when the Boston Breakers started. They went to Portland, but they had great uniforms too, as a matter of fact.
I'm sorry. That is incorrect, and I'm a loser. They went to New Orleans, then they went to Portland.
Right.
Yeah. If you're gonna start talking USFL stuff, you got to get it right with this guy, because I have no life. I have no life, and it's pretty much all I know.
No,
I can't tell you. I can't tell you where my keys are, but I can tell you that the Breakers quarterback was John Walton, and they had Marcus Dupree as a running back. And all kinds of useless miscellany.
We all have those days where we forgot, where we would place our keys and turn out to be somewhere deep in our pockets or somewhere in our jackets or something like that.
But I can always tell you, I don't care how forgetful I am about my keys. I tell you, like Steve Kemp wore number 21 with the Yankees, and Herschel Walker's stats with the Generals. Like there's something about sports and numbers and names.
Right.
I'll be 95 years old in a nursing home, not knowing my name, but I'll be able to tell you Doug Flutie, number 22 with the Generals for 2 seasons.
Outstanding stuff, Jeff. I wanted to kind of switch up a little bit. I saw 30 for 30 recently on the 86 New York Mets, in which you were part of the person being interviewed for that one. That team was something, quite a character. The highlight of that show was, I believe, that was the last out when Jesse Orozco struck out whoever the batter was, and Billy Joel's
Buddy Barrett.
As
a Red Sox fan, I remember the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
And Billy Joel's "This Is a Time to Remember" song was playing, about the same time he struck out, and the chaos ensued, and it made me really, really emotional, because that song, I haven't heard that song in such a long time, and I thought it was so fitting.
Yeah.
Because as a longtime Chicago Bears fan, the '85 Bears is something that a lot of long-suffering Bears fans will always be able to hang on to. And then a year later, the '86 Mets, rambunctious, wild, just very similar to the Chicago Bears. And I was like really, really drawn to the Mets, and then I really, really enjoyed the entire series.
I thought it was very well done, and I actually thought that was a perfect song for that moment. I agree with you. Also, I'm from New York, and Billy Joel has this connection with New York that's very raw and real and personal. I also think it's funny because I did write. I don't know if I've ever even thought about this really. Like I wrote a biography of Walter Payton, so I touched on a lot about the '85 Bears. I wrote a biography of the '86 Mets, so obviously deep with them, and those teams coming in back-to-back seasons. It is kind of interesting. They both had really bad rap songs, although the Bears one was much better. Super Bowl Shuffle.
Yeah.
They both sort of had these wild, rambunctious locker rooms, clubhouses, with guys like Jim McMahon or Darryl Strawberry or Lenny Dykstra, guys like that all over the place. And I feel like it was a really joyful. It was a time to be. I just don't think I'm an old man saying this. It's as fun today to grow up with sports as it was back then. And I think part of it, it's just so accessible now and it's so in your face, and you can look up everything and you can see under the hood with everything. And like when I was a kid, like there was a real mystique to Walter Payton and the USFL and the '86 Mets and you name it. And they just felt so large. They just felt so large and so magical. And those moments like that, Jesse Orozco striking out Marty Barrett was a magical, magical moment. Even the Bears beating the Patriots 46-10 in the Super Bowl. I mean, I remember vividly watching that game, and just it wasn't a great Super Bowl on style points, but it was so dominant of a performance that in a way it was a great Super Bowl because it was a verification of this thing. Mm-hmm. And I'll always remember like Mike Ditka and Buddy Ryan being carried off on the shoulders of the players, and it just there was no better time to be a kid watching sports, I think. Yeah. And right around then, that's a money spot. Maybe it's just coincidence that I was a kid, or maybe I'm just extremely biased.
But no, I hear you, because I think a lot of people still hang on to that '80s. Being the songs, movies. They say that the '80s were the best time of their lives. Many people would say that, and obviously what you just alluded in terms of sports, with the characters that you just mentioned. And then '80s also, let's not forget the NBA, the Lakers, Celtics battles. There were some real great moments in that '80s that, that I think a lot of us still remember to this day.
The funny thing is, I think '80s music is pretty trash. I think '80s movies, we have I have two kids, and every now and then we'll show our kids like some movie from the '80s, like you need to see blah, blah, blah. And it almost always sucks. Like movies are better now. Music is probably better now. The thing about sports, like I mean, no disrespect to '80s music, but the thing, I love Hall & Oates. I'm a huge Hall & Oates fan, but otherwise, one thing that that was really the final era of is guys would stick with their teams for a long period of time. And that really mattered. All right. Ferris Bueller was a great movie. You got me there. You got me there. But, to be an '86 Mets fan, right? You had Gooden for years. You had Strawberry for years. You had Hernandez. You had all those guys for years. And they would develop prospects, and they'd be your team for years. Chicago Bears, same thing. McMahon was your quarterback for years. Walter Payton was there for years. Nowadays, guys know, and I'm not saying this is it's fair. It's right for the players. Like you should have free agency and you should be able. But from simply a fan standpoint and developing loyalty to these things, the '80s was really a period where you could do it. And nowadays, I mean, look at LeBron. I love LeBron, but LeBron is now on his third team, twice, fourth if you count Cleveland twice. And it's just a little bit harder the Steph Currys of the world are very rare. It's more common that you're not going to have a guy. So I think that stuff mattered back then.
Right. And this just was, and one more question before I wanted to move on to your stuff on Sports by Brooks, which was quite interesting. But the fact is that you seem to have more characters and characters and more flakes in the 1980s than you do nowadays. It's more concerned about your brand. It's more concerned about your social media account. but you had guys, as you mentioned, guys who were there for on the team for years. They could build that chemistry together. Whereas you don't see that. Teams are basically 1 year and then you're done and you move on to something else. But it seemed like as you mentioned, the Mets and the Bears, and of course you go back to the Celtics and Lakers, which Steven just mentioned. They were there for years and were bound together for years, and you were able to get that chemistry.
I mean, I think the biggest difference, to be honest, is this.
Yeah,
I just do. Right. I think that's the biggest difference by far. Is you're an athlete now, and one quote unquote is a journalist, and everyone can ruin you any moment. So the 86 Mets, just as an example, I mean, those guys would go out drinking together, and after a game, they go to the local bars, Finn McCool's, and they would drink, and nobody had cell phones. So nowadays, the 86 Mets either couldn't exist or it would just be a total nightmare where you'd have videos all over Twitter of Dwight Gooden snorting coke and Lenny Dykstra getting wasted and fights and like you couldn't. There was a bar fight that year at a place called Cooters in Houston where 4 Mets got arrested. That was embarrassing. 4 Mets got arrested. Imagine how embarrassing that thing is that everyone has a cell phone.
Right.
This is a difference maker. So I'm with you 100%.
Right. Same can be said about the 85 Bears as well.
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Right. One article that you had been researching for quite some time and it got spiked and you just recently put it on your Substack was the article on Sports by Brooks. It's for those of you who don't know, he was a blogger. When I was starting as a blogger back in the early 2000s, he was someone to look forward to. And if he linked to your website, which was mine, which was Fang's Bites at one time, it got you links, and you would probably give you some tremendous traffic and also put your site down for a few hours. You went searching for Sports by Brooks, and you eventually found him. Jeff, talk to you a little bit about the background about Sports by Brooks and how you managed to find him and why you decided to bring back that article, bring the article up just recently.
I must correct you. I did not actually find him. I came close to finding him. I didn't find him. Basically, I was at Bleacher Report a bunch of years ago doing these long features, and my editor at the time, Matt Sullivan, said, why don't you track down Sports by Brooks? That guy vanished. And I was like, in my head, I was like, I don't really know who that is because I never read Sports by Brooks. It wasn't really my kind of thing. It's still not my kind of thing. I'm not a big sports gossip guy, but I like mysteries. So I said, yeah, okay. And it really was this crazy thing where this guy who was kind of, in a way, he was Bill Simmons before Bill Simmons a little bit, where he was this sort of, he was kind of, you could argue, altering the landscape of sports media and what it meant to be a part of sports media. And it was very gossipy, and he posted a lot of pictures of half-dressed women, with belly button rings and blah, blah, blah. And that was kind of his brand. But he also broke some stories. He broke a lot of stories about the Penn State Sandusky thing. And so, and then he vanished. He just vanished. One day he just vanished. And I really like stories like that. I really like. And I love finding people. It's one of my favorite things is trying to find people. So it was a crazy few months. I mean, I ended up working with 3 different private investigators, literally 3 different private investigators where I used their services. One I knew, and he helped me out a lot. And it was leading me down all these different paths of what happened to this guy. And he didn't just fall off the face of the earth. He fell off the face of the earth. His credit score froze, just wasn't used, voting records froze, everything just froze. And one private investigator said to me, I think he just went to Mexico. He probably went to Mexico. Another guy's he's probably dead, he's just gone. He's frozen. And my craziest moment was I basically had a bunch of addresses, potential addresses. And I drove to this place in LA, and it was a kind of not seedy, but not great apartment complex. And I had this number, I don't know what it was, apartment 6. And in the parking lot, every apartment had an assigned space, and there were no cars except for apartment 6. So, all right, there's a car there, maybe he's home. And I walk up, and I recently wrote about knocking on strange doors. It's one of the things I've done a lot of. It's always intimidating, but I've done it. So I go up to this door, and I have a copy of one of my books with me. I knock on the door, knock again. And this guy answers, and I'm like, hey, my name's Jeff Pearlman. I'm a writer. I don't know, but I'm looking for Brooks from Sports by Brooks. And the guy goes, yeah, man, wrong. Sorry, I don't know who that is. All right, closes his door. I drive off. Crap, that didn't work out. And like a bunch of days later, I'm thinking like maybe a week and a half later, I'm scrolling. I'm just on Facebook looking up different names of people, and I type in the name of the number 2 editor at Sports by Brooks, and that was him who answered the door. And I was like, whoa, what? And then I went back and he wouldn't answer the door. And that was kind of it. And I found out there were things I did not feel comfortable putting in. I posted on my Substack because people have been asking about it for a long time. And I just, yeah, it's fine. There was stuff I did not put in there. There are things, that I thought would violate his privacy and sort of his right to privacy. But overall, it was exciting. But ultimately, I still don't have a wonderful answer what happened to the guy. So that's a little frustrating. Anyway, I like chases. I'm a big fan of chases.
And the thing was, he just magically appeared again on Twitter a few years ago. Still not blogging, but just posting some historical stuff and stuff that are projects that are appeals to him, I would say, most likely. But it's kind of interesting how he disappeared and reappeared, and then he's just doing his stuff.
I'll tell you something that I have definitely learned as I've gotten older, and I did not subscribe to this when I was younger because I was an asshole, is sometimes people hide, sometimes people vanish because they want to go away, right? And they have something going on in their life or blah, 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 and they don't want to be found, and they don't want to be found. And generally speaking, I'm not saying someone who commits a crime, someone who's accused of whatever, raping a kid or robbing a bank or blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying it applies to those people at all. But sometimes people are just like, I'm kind of done with this world. I have this issue. I have that issue. I'm just tired. And I just want to go away. And I don't want to be the subject of a 10,000 word Bleacher Report investigation. And I do feel like generally those people deserve their privacy. Like if I'm done with journalism one day and I just don't want to talk about journalism anymore, I think I should have that right to be sort of left alone. So maybe I shouldn't have even run that story ever. I don't know.
And any particular reason why you were given about why they spiked this story to begin with?
Kind of multiple reasons. I think the biggest one was there were just some reasons that seemed, they're just lines you wouldn't want to cross, like reasons a guy disappeared that might be good reasons that would be ethically unfair to violate. I think that was a big one. And also there was this question, like if someone doesn't want to be found and he hasn't done anything wrong, he just doesn't want to be found, he just wants to vanish. Why, maybe you shouldn't do it. So in a way, like I think if I had found him and found out whatever, he was snorting coke and blah, 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 I wouldn't have run this story either. Like I just, I just, or here he is, he's in Minnesota. Like it's not very fair to him.
Absolutely true. And of course, you can't speculate what he was doing during that time or anything. As you mentioned, totally unfair to him. So, but it was fascinating. It was a very fascinating read, Jeff, and I'm glad that you finally were able to put it on your Substack. And I just found it, as someone who had been wondering what happened to him, and we followed each other on Twitter for quite some time, and he would always reply to me every once in a while. It was something that was fascinating to me. Maybe not necessarily to our audience, but something that I thought was quite fascinating.
It's a funny story because like you do a profile of like Clayton Kershaw, right? Like, all right, 95% of society does not care, but there's 5% who care deeply about the Dodgers. You do a story about Sports by Brooks, 99.99999% of society does not care. But for journalism geeks like us, it's a thing,
Absolutely.
Jeff, I wanted to touch a little bit of, the work that you've done. Obviously, Ken has mentioned about Substack. You no longer do that. I know a lot of famous writers like Mark Stein, longtime NBA writer, left New York Times, ESPN, and to do his own Substack. Is there any like a reward versus risk when it comes to going out on your own, especially with so many outlets nowadays these days?
Okay, so first, that's a great question. I will say I do Substack. I actually just started somewhere recently, but there's no reason to know that. I literally no biggie. 5 weeks ago, I started like a really nerdy journalism pod Substack, right? And I did it for my own sort of enjoyment. That's it. And just the journalism and blah, blah, blah. And that's why I ran the Brooks thing. I don't know. Like I'm a fan. I think like there's a political writer named Heather Cox Richardson who's awesome. and she's a history professor, and she's insane. She's the best, and a being too. I think she probably makes more than $1 million a year doing her Substack right now, and like there's this. I have a really good friend, Ann Byrne, who she's actually on my podcast this week, and she's a food writer, and she just started a Substack in April, and she has 21,000 subscribers are reading her Substack. Now you may think 21,000, that's like a small newspaper, but they're individual people interested specifically in what you're writing. And I mean, journalism is weird. Like when I was growing up, I'm 49. When I was growing up, my absolute dream was to write for Sports Illustrated. That was my dream. I want to write for Illustrated. It was a dream of so many people in my shoes as a kid who love sports and love sports writing. I don't really think it's a dream anymore. It barely exists, and like even writing for ESPN.com, I don't know. It doesn't feel the same. And Bleacher Report is a perfect example. I wrote for Bleacher Report for about 3 years. They were really into these long, meaty features. They would pay for them. And I think one day they were like, wait, we can run a video of a monkey eating a basketball and we'll get just as many clicks. And so Substack is basically in a way the antidote to that. Like I'm going to provide you with really good material and hopefully you'll pay to subscribe and you're going to get what you want from it. So for me personally, it's not a moneymaker. It's more about bringing attention to journalism and also on a side note, bringing attention to my books. But for people who want to make it, who just want to have their own voice or, production, I'm a huge, huge fan of it. Huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you mentioned, Substack is becoming the hot place for a lot of writers to go to and to see what they can do. And of course, it's all about content, and content is king. And I found that it's just a perfect place for long form, and especially your article on Brooks and other things that you do over there. So appreciate that you have an outlet, and I can find it, Jeff.
You can find it. Crazy. Pearlman.substack.com. Not complicated. I promise.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff.
And feel free to plug that as many times as you want.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm not really a plugger. I know a lot of people.
You certainly deserve it. Based on your,
Thanks.
bestsellers that you have written before, and all that other stuff. Is there any? Can you give us a preview of any books, any teams, or any athletes that you're currently working on that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a book about Bo Jackson. That's my new project I'm working on. And yeah, I mean, the poster's not here. I mean, it's sitting in my daughter's room. She went to college, so she took the poster, but she always had a huge Bo Jackson poster behind. Yeah, I've been working on this for about 1.5 years. When I was a kid of the 80s, I mean, Bo Jackson was it. I had a Bo Jackson poster in my room. And so I've been deep into that for about 1.5 years now, to my family chagrin, because I keep telling Bo Jackson stories, but I am deep into the Bo Jackson world.
Wow.
Can you give us one good anecdote that you don't necessarily spoil the book, but any ones that you've found that you can share?
Oh yeah, I mean, the guy was ridiculous. Let me think for a minute. What's the best? I mean, when he was in college, this isn't the best one. This isn't the thing about Bo Jackson that's crazy, truly crazy. Like everyone knows, like I'm sure you guys do. You've seen him climb the wall in Baltimore. Oh, yeah. He climbed the wall. Mm-hmm. He ran over Bosworth, and in the scene, he ran for a 91-yard touchdown down the sideline. Like, he led off the All-Star game with a home run in 1989. There's all these, there's this list of Bo Jackson things, right? And they're all freaking insane. Like, they're all just insane. When he was in college, he would do these freaking. First of all, he ran a 4.1340 in college. A 4.13. The guy was 6'1", about 220 when he ran a 4.1340. It is a preposterous time, right? When he was in college, a teammate dared him to jump over a Volkswagen, and he did it. Like, he did crap that's insane. They were playing against Michigan in the Sugar Bowl when he was at Auburn, and the Sugar Bowl had a scoreboard. It was way up. I don't remember the height. It's in my book. I just don't remember. But I think the only guy that ever hit it was Ray Guy, the Oakland punter, one time. So all the Auburn players are like standing midfield during a workout, trying to hit the ball by throwing the ball up, kicking the ball up. And Bo Jackson just walks up, whomp, hits it, walks away. Like, there's a million things. He used to there'd be he hated lifting weights, and there'd just be these moments. I mean, I had 1 million people tell me these stories. There'd be moments where some guy would be like in the weight room at Auburn or with the Royals or wherever, Memphis, when he played minor league ball, like bench pressing, whatever you want to name the number, 350 pounds. And some guy would be like, yeah, Bo, I heard you don't lift weights. And Bo would walk over, he'd be like, yeah, Bo don't lift weights. And he would walk over, sit on the bench, put the bar up, go 1, 2, 3, pop, walk out. Like over and over and over again. I don't care what anyone says. I get Jim Thorpe and I get Michael Jordan and I get Mike Trout. There's never been a better athlete than Bo Jackson. Never.
Yeah.
I mean, that run you just showed right there. He ran over this guy, Mike Harden, on the Denver Broncos. It's in.
Right.
If you can, I don't know if you can show that again. It's the most crazy. Mike Harden was a badass tackler. He was like a vicious safety for the Denver Broncos, right? Wait, he missed it by a second. I love this play. And I talked to like all these guys about it. I know you can do it. Wait, here.
There it is.
Like, goodbye, Mike Harden. I'm just going to run over you. Like it was like, it's just insane. And like the plays that he ran the things he did. His first at bat in the major leagues, came against Steve Carlton, who was at the end of his career. Guy wound up in the Hall of Fame, famous lefty pitcher, and he was hanging on with the White Sox. Number one, Bo Jackson had no remote idea who he was. And number two, Bo Jackson's first major league hit was he beat out a ground ball to second. Like he hit a ground ball to second base and beat it out. That's his first hit. Like who beats out a ground ball to second base? It's insane. It's the best. So I could, it's one of my favorite topics I've ever written about. He's just a joy.
Well, we look forward to that, Jeff. And again, great stuff. And of course, man who has written about the USFL, written about so many subjects. Walter Payton, coming up a book about Bo Jackson. Yes. And of course, writer, a man who's willing to find people if he has to. But like with Sports by Brooks, but unfortunately did not get there. But it turns out to be a very fascinating read. Jeff Pearlman, Man of Figs, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll have you back once again down the road. And we look forward to reading your Substack, which is pearlman.substack.com, correct?
Correct. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. We'll see you again down the road.
All right. Ciao.
And the Double A team will return right after this.
Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com.
Back with another edition of the Double A team, and we thank Jeff Pearlman. Substack, pearlman.substack.com. That is the site to join, and there it is. And you can make sure you visit that. And his article on his search for Sports by Brooks is there, so you can take a look at that. He doesn't charge, so that's one good thing. A lot of people do charge on Substack.com. That site is free. So
who doesn't love free things, huh?
No, exactly. He makes a lot of money on other stuff, but again, we appreciate Joe.
Absolutely.
Joe coming in. Let's talk a little bit in this segment, free for all. So, Stephen, we did not tape on our usual night. We're taping on a different night. One of the reasons was because the Chicago Bears, which is, of course, a big part of the Barnum Network, played the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I know it was frustrating in the first half to see some of the things that Justin Fields was doing, but he did actually lead them down to get a score to put them ahead and have a chance to win. With some things that you liked that you saw for Justin on Monday night?
Oh, there's plenty. The first half was just an utter disaster. With Matt Nagy back from COVID, the second drive, you take a timeout. And then you line up and get called for illegal formation, which has become a huge staple of what has been a disaster with the Chicago Bears under Matt Nagy. And I really didn't have a lot of hope watching the game, especially in the first half. But then in the second half, things kind of really clicked, and Justin Fields really balled out. This was his breakout game. On a national television. He's been in bright lights when he was playing for Ohio State so many times. So this is nothing new to him, but I really like what I saw. But there are so many things that I didn't like, obviously, with Matt Nagy's coaching. He didn't do a bootleg play action until the second quarter, which led to a big gain. And then the Bears promptly committed a penalty sack, I believe, and then it turned into a 4th and 23, and they ended up having to punt from their own 40 or 30, which just added more frustration to what has been a very disappointing season thus far. And while I like to think that a lot of Bears fans have Justin Fields' growth as the only source of hope and the reason why we keep watching the rest of the year. I keep tweeting last night, why do we, delay the inevitable that Matt Nagy was eventually going to be fired? And last night's game, in which with so many penalties that was committed by the Bears, and I know we'll get to the ref stuff in a little bit of a moment, but it's a poor reflection on the coaching staff, and then last week when the Bears were playing 49ers, there weren't that many penalties, and the offense looked a little more smooth, and Justin Fields had a hell of a game against the 49ers. And then Matt Nagy shows up, and then you have 12 penalties, and some of them were very egregious. And to be honest, that really overshadowed what was supposed to be a great game by Justin Fields. And I know a lot of people want to forget about Matt Nagy, but I just cannot forget about Matt Nagy's presence and how much damage it meant in the outcome of the ball game. With the, even with the touchdown, you still had a lot of time, and then the Bears committed a bunch of bonehead penalties, including that Casillas Marsh's taunting, which I didn't see any taunting at all. For the most part, I thought he got called. They threw a flag because of that, the Roadhouse sidekick, which he's known for. And I thought, oh my God, they threw a flag on that. But and it turned out he didn't do any of taunting. It just basically was running, and then the Tony Corrente, the head referee, side hipped him for some reason, and then literally threw the flag because he ran into him for some reason. And we don't get any breaks, unfortunately.
And plus, too, there was a roughing the passer penalty that wasn't called. That the couple of late hits that occurred on Justin Fields. I know that referees like to give leeway to rookies, to the like a Tom Brady's of the world, but he was hit late a couple of times, and it easily could have been called and weren't. So I don't understand some of the calls that were made.
I know Justin Fields was actually asking the refs, why aren't you calling, the roughing the passer on me? There were 2 times in which he should have gotten at least one, when there was clearly a late shove at 2 or 3 seconds after he let go of the ball.
Right.
And people, all of LeBrons of the world, Desmond Howe was tweeting how the refs don't get any don't face any consequences or punishment. The whole world saw it last night. As bad as the Bears are, and Matt Nagy obviously shouldn't get any pass out of this, the whole world saw it. And just like the Washington football team email fiasco, the NFL just don't seem to care much about holding themselves accountable, and they just seems to make these things very difficult when they don't have to do so. Don't you think, Ken?
Absolutely. I mean, there's some strange things that go on with calls, and I know that ESPN had its own rules analyst yesterday, and he was defending some of those calls. I'm saying I don't know what he's saying, but of course he's gonna defend his brothers on the field. But I do like the fact that he did question the fact they didn't call that roughing the passer call that was non-existent on Justin Fields, especially the second one when she was hit late. So at least I give him kudos for at least questioning the fact they didn't call that correctly. And if you're going to call that on Tom Brady, you should be doing it consistently and call that on Justin Fields when that happens as well. So
absolutely.
I know that Steven is very frustrated as a Bears fan. As a Cleveland Browns fan, I'm a little bit happier today in regards to the Bengals win yesterday. I'm not going to go into that because I know how frustrated you are, Steven.
No. It's okay. I watched that game, and I was actually pretty impressed, with the OBJ fiasco that was consuming the entire organization. And he got his wish today. He was officially
released,
cleared waivers, and became a free agent. So it's unfortunate that a super talented player like OBJ got derailed by inconsistencies, injuries, and sometimes off the field stuff. Really never developed any sort of chemistry with Baker Mayfield. OBJ's father called him out and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of ironic that, without OBJ, Cleveland actually put up a significant numbers, which obviously, led to questions as to, how good is Cleveland, without OBJ? I know Tony Grossi of ESPN Cleveland asked that question to, head coach Kevin Stefanski after the game, and Stefanski didn't want to answer that question. Yeah. But I think, if this game, that we're watching right now is a indication of Cleveland, living up to their, preseason expectation going forward, then I think releasing OBJ could be the catalyst, because you no longer have to deal with the distractions anymore.
Well, I'm hoping it's good. Cleveland, of course, putting up a 40 burger on the Cincinnati Bengals yesterday, 41-16. Baker Mayfield finally looking good, making some good decisions. We're hearing that maybe Odell Beckham Jr. may become a Packer down the line. I know the Patriots are involved in that as well. So we'll see if what comes of that. And maybe Aaron Rodgers, who we haven't discussed, by the way, who made another appearance on Pat McAfee's show today. And we can go into that a little bit later. We can go into that some other time as we're running out of time on this show. But he finally tried to backtrack on what he said a few days ago, in which he talked about how he decided not to get the shot, defended the fact that he got the shot, was getting his medical advice from Joe Rogan. And of course, on his most recent appearance on Pat McAfee's show, which came on the day of this taping, he apologized for those statements, but still really didn't mention about the doctors he had seen. He still Pat McAfee did question the fact that he about the doctors he had seen, and instead of answering that directly, Aaron Rodgers mentioned that he had talked with his family. So interesting there about some of the comments about Aaron Rodgers. Steven, quickly, your thoughts on those?
Yeah, he's a weird cat. As a Bears fan, I hate the Packers, but I respect what they do. They're, obviously have been a thorn on us Bears fans' side for.
You're not a shareholder, Steven?
And I gotta tell you, he really, lost a lot of credibility, with the word immunization, misleading stuff like that, and then using the woke mob to, complain about stuff, and then obviously openly complaining about how he's being viewed and being seen, from a social society, not just from the sports world, but you reap what you sow. Unfortunately, he already lost a sponsor with a Wisconsin-based health group yesterday or the day before. I know
Yeah.
State Farm is sticking by him, obviously, but we'll see. Maybe we probably won't see a lot of him going forward on that State Farm commercial, but who knows? I just saw about more than an hour ago, that Rob Demosky, ESPN's Packers reporter, is saying that the Packers have been fined what is that, $300,000 for violating NFLPA COVID protocols.
Mhm.
Rogers, Alan Lazard got fined almost $15,000, which obviously is a slap in a
That's a
slap
kick
in a
in
wrist.
the bucket for them.
Absolutely, it's really not much, and I'm not just saying as a a Bears fan, but I thought maybe if the league is going to fine the Patriots for deflate gate and all that, the video, and all that other stuff that's going on, why can't they just set a standard? I thought they should have at least gotten maybe $1 million fine, or maybe lost a pick or two, in
Yep.
the next year and the year after.
And
So
they
this
did-
is basically just another hypocrisy that we touched on earlier for Washington football team email, and then Cal McNair basically not being disciplined for the Asian virus stuff. That the NFL is still the king. We can all agree, but between this and the referee fiasco that we saw last night, with the gambling aspect of it, I think NFL better be very, very, very careful when it comes to misjudging, or I don't want to say maybe arrogant enough to anger a lot of fans, because I know a lot of fans are pretty pissed with the officiating these days.
Yeah, and if the NFL can fine teams last year for violating COVID protocols, and they did last year quite heavily, you would expect that they would try to do that, especially over Dalvin Cook. You especially would think that they would do that with the Green Bay Packers, and certainly give a stiffer fine, and maybe losing draft picks. So we'll see about that. So
Absolutely.
it's very mind-boggling how the NFL hands out these penalties, and we can go about how sports leagues are being quite hypocritical. We can go to the NHL and the Blackhawks too, but that we're running out of time, so we really can't get into that tonight. One quick thing that we can mention also too, this is news media, not necessarily sports media, but we always get breaking news on this show somehow. Whenever we tape, something breaks. Brian Williams is going to be leaving NBC after 28 years. He has announced that as of the night of this taping. Formerly the anchor of NBC Nightly News, he is anchoring the 11th hour with Brian Williams on MSNBC. He has announced that he will leave at the end of this year. Brian, of course, had to leave NBC Nightly News after making up stuff that he was in a helicopter in Iraq, and he lost his job anchoring NBC Nightly News in 2015. Then he reinvented himself by going over to MSNBC and anchoring at the 11 o'clock p.m. Show, the 11th hour with Brian Williams. So interesting that he has decided to leave, but I think he's going on his own terms, basically, Stephen, after the embarrassment he had over 6 years ago. It's definitely can. It's interesting to see what happened there.
Absolutely. You touched bases on his career got derailed when he obviously made it up about being on a helicopter flying over Iraq. Obviously, it's a reminder that even a guy like Brian Williams, who were once on top of the world, can obviously ruin his own reputation. And I don't know if he was fully able to rehab himself to the level that he once achieved. But it's good that he was able to land on his feet again. Obviously, with the MSNBC, probably offering him like a lending hand to, obviously rehab himself, and good on him to do to leave on his own terms. And it will be interesting to see where he lands going forward.
We're getting some more interesting news here, and I can tell you that again, breaking on the show in regards to Dalvin Cook. According to Adam Schefter, ESPN insider, Minnesota Vikings running back Dalvin Cook is the victim of domestic abuse. I'm reading this directly from the tweet, and think Stephen, if you can find it also I think our producer's also sending it over. Joe's sending it over to you. Dalvin Cook is the victim of domestic abuse and extortion. There's pending litigation, according to his agent Zach Hiller. Schechter continues. An incident occurred over 1 year ago when a female U.S. military sergeant used a stolen garage door opener to enter Cook's home and attack a guest of Cook's and Cook, according to his agent. Military sergeant maced Cook directly in his eyes immediately upon illegally entering. Hiller said, it's interesting. The statement, according to apparently, has come from his lawyer as well. And you see it up on the screen there as well. Joe has put it up there, but it says on the evening of December 19th, 2028, U.S. military sergeant first class Graceland Trimble broke into the home of Dalvin Cook and assaulted him and his two house guests. Sergeant Trimble and her attorneys are now attempting to extort him for millions of dollars. While Mr. Cook and Sergeant Trimble had a short-term relationship over several months, she became emotionally abusive, physically aggressive, and confrontational, and repeatedly attempted to provoke Mr. Cook. Sergeant Trimble damaged his vehicle on at least 2 occasions and assaulted him and attempted to stop him from seeing other women. This is a very interesting story. We don't usually see this happen the other way. Usually it's the other way around.
Right.
But Dalvin Cook and his agent are saying that that Sergeant Trimble is trying to extort him. And also it was a home intrusion as well. So this is a wacky story. We don't really have much reaction because it's just breaking as we're starting up. But Stephen, again, another occasion where real life hits the NFL. We usually try to go to the NFL for some try to go away from real life, but real life coming into sports as well.
Yeah, I actually saw this before we went on line. It was like, like you said, Adam Schefter tweeted this about an hour or so ago, and I'll be honest, I didn't think much of it, but it was crazy. Like you said, it's usually the male athletes are the ones who are, how do you say, the aggressor.
Yes.
Normally, hitting a female companion or their girlfriends or wives. So we're used to seeing that, but in this case, it's female military personnel attacking a professional athletes. It's kind of the story itself is pretty wacky.
And again, we have to say this allegedly happened. Of course, it's a he said, she said situation because she filed a civil lawsuit against Cook to say against Cook, and she claims that he assaulted her. So there's again he said, she said type of situation. And again, this is just a fluid situation. And again, we something that has been breaking just as we are hitting the air at the moment. And so again, we're getting these breaking news. It's our show, and it just seems that we get breaking news all the time, Stephen.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go, I wanted to touch bases that we wanted to do in the opening monologue, but Kyle Larson won the NASCAR championship last Sunday. And the reason I bring him up was because he's a Japanese American driver. And last year, he was fired after he made a racial slur, using the N-word while I think he was driving in a simulated racing. And he was interviewed by Emmanuel Acho, and throughout that interview, it made me really, really disturbed, because he was kind of like half smiling in that interview. And it made me really, a little disappointed. in terms of how serious was he with his apologies, especially when you're being interviewed by Emmanuel Acho, which at the time was a rising a media personality, having retired from the NFL. And to me, that apology seemed a very, very fakish and disingenuous. And as I said in the beginning of our show, the reason why we started this was to combat AAPI racism. And Larson's comment really didn't certainly help our cause or our perception. There are certain things that obviously our AAPI community have had a rough relationship with the other race, Hispanic Americans, African Americans also. And his comments certainly didn't help at all. And him winning NASCAR, while it is a hell of an accomplishment considering the history of NASCAR, deeply rooted in the Deep South, and obviously trying to change its perception and all that stuff. While it's a huge accomplishment itself, I'm not going to say that this is a redemption for him, and that this is one of the steps that hopefully Kyle will continue to use his platform to to change the perception of us, because we have a lot to learn too. Our parents, great parents, obviously don't have a good relationship with the other races, and that's something that the younger generation of Asian American, Pacific Islander leaders have to do to bridge the gap that might still exist between us African Americans and Hispanics, because their fight of social equality and justice is our fight too. Their fight is our fight. That's what I've been saying. We're not trying to hijack their movement or any of that kind of stuff. I don't want anybody to misconstrue or misunderstand the purpose of our show and our commitment. And I know there are people out there who offer support and lending hand to our group, and then behind closed doors they say egregious racist things, like calling African Americans N words and other stuff about other racial groups, which is not something that we want to deal with, or we don't need people like that offering fake support to our AAPI community. And I'm not naming anybody, but we know people like that out there, whether it's on this Barroom Network or anybody who watches this show. If there are people like that out there, we're certainly going to call them out, for being disingenuous. And our show is to make sure that we bring the issues of AAPI, as well as the other racial groups that, who will offer support and advice on how we combat these types of racism that has, sparked, increased during this pandemic. And like you said, Ken, at the beginning of the show, this isn't the first time, and this is certainly not the last time we're going to be talking about these issues within our community.
Absolutely, and well stated, Stephen. And I appreciate your statements on Kyle Martin. We have
yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. And that's going to do it for our show. We'd like to thank Jeff Pearlman, who has his own Substack, pearlman.substack.com, as you can see on the bottom there. Don't forget to visit his site. A lot of great stuff that we discussed today, and we'll have a lot more coming up in a couple of weeks. Stephen, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken, as always. This was a phenomenal show. Really great conversation with Jeff Pearlman. And I also want to say thank you to fill-in host Joe Mandel, in for Aldo Gandia, who is filming his show as we speak right now with Dan Aguirre. Thank you very much, Joe. And, hopefully we get to do this, regularly if needed. And thank you so much for helping to produce our show tonight.
And thank you very much for watching. And we'll be back again in a couple of weeks. This is the Double A team. I'm Ken Fang. He's Stephen Negishi. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.